Do you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yes, I'll turn this over to you and let you give any further background that you want to give about yourself and your framework.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, and it's my pleasure to be with you guys tonight. As Jeff mentioned, we go back a long way, 26 years now already. How time flies. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about visual literacy and what I think is an appropriate framework or a way to structure our thinking about visual literacy in the relationship to teaching and learning. So it's a very important skill set that we need to dig into with our kids, and I'm going to give you some ideas about that and how you can think about that. Um, all the resources for my presentations are at jakes.editme.com, and I'll put that in the chat area again. Feel free to take a look at this presentation. Really, everything that I'm going to talk about tonight. This is actually an hour-long presentation. I'm sort of stripping it down a bit, but I'm going to give you the essence of it. Most of the content, or all the content that I'm going to talk about, is listed there in hyperlinks. So feel free to go and visit and take a look at the resources I'm going to talk about today, and plus my other presentations. Right now, I'm currently serve as the Instructional Technology Coordinator for Glenbrook South High School in Glenview, Illinois. I've been there, started my 4th year, and it's again my 26th year in education. So let's go ahead and get started. When I think about visual literacy, I think about 3 discrete skills, and there's a lot of ways to define what it means to be visually literate. But I think these 3 things capture everything, at least for me. So can you navigate and can you locate visual resources? And once you find visual resources, can you evaluate them? In a world of Photoshop, we have to make sure that what we're looking at is authentic in real, actually. So evaluating information, not only text-based information, but visual information is an important skill for our kids. And then really the final skill set within visual literacy, I think, is being able to communicate. And that's really on 2 levels. That's one, being able to make your own visuals and make your own meaning and communicate that. But it's also now with Creative Commons licensing and things like that, being able to take imagery from others and use that and repurpose that, remix it into your own new message. So those are my 3 basic skills. So let's step into the first part of my framework. And as a former biology teacher, I can't resist this. And for visual literacy and visual communication, there is a biological basis. There is no doubt that this plays an incredibly important part in how we structure instruction, how we help kids learn, and how we communicate with visuals. So let's talk a little bit about that. The brain itself is 3.5 pounds. It's made of 12 billion cells. So, this 3.5 pound brain is set up to process and communicate visually. So how does that work? So we've got, when we talk about the brain's connected to the ears, of course, through the auditory nerve. And just to use some layman's terms, that's the ear to the brain, the auditory nerve is about 30,000 fibers. And when we consider the connection of the eye to the brain, or the optic nerve, it's about 1 million fibers. So the bandwidth that we have to capture visual information from the eye to the brain via the optic nerve is way more than what we have for the auditory nerve. And if anybody ever tells you you're not a visual learner, well, that's just plain wrong, because we process so much visual. You have the bandwidth and the capacity to take advantage of that. Now, when we're talking about this, you have to understand that the optic nerve, and when that information gets fed into the brain is not unlimited in terms of its processing capability. And that comes into play when we're talking about design of instruction and design of messages with visual elements. I'm not going to have time to get into cognitive load theory tonight, but that's something that you should explore. Extraneous and intrinsic cognitive load is something that I'm quite interested in, and it really impacts how we design messages and what kind of cognitive load we place on working memory within the brain, which of course is limited. So we've got these 2 pipes coming in, and we have the optic nerve, which is of course incredibly important. And one way to enhance, since we're talking about human beings, is then to craft a message, but using emotion. And so the first part, there's a biological basis to communicate, and then to communicate effectively, how can we blend emotion into our message? And the key for those people that really communicate well, tell stories. And when I was in the classroom, and Jeff, I know you can relate to this. Whenever we told a story about ourselves, the kids dialed right in, and because there's that emotional element, they connect with you that way, and it's really an important way in which to communicate. So Seth Godin says that communication is a transfer emotion, and I think that's a really good way to frame it. I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind. And all I have to do is show you this image, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it takes you right back to September 11th, 2011. And I don't really even have to include any kind of text with this. Now, you should know, if you look in the lower right, the citation is from Bill Biggert. And actually, these are the last photographs that Bill Biggert ever took. He was killed as the second tower collapsed, and they found his digital camera with a memory card intact weeks later, and these were published on Flickr. We've also got, if you really want a really compelling message, that's a YouTube video. And YouTube, of course, is a great way in which to communicate. This is the Water Buffalo movie. Look it up on YouTube. Watch it. It's what happens is a gentleman goes to China as a musician, and he goes to a small town, and he wants to purchase a water buffalo for a family. And a water buffalo in China costs $250. And they give it to a family, and it is the most wonderful gift that a Chinese family in a rural area can ever be given, because it just takes their lives and completely changes it. And by the end of this, you're ready to pony up the $250 and send it off and buy somebody a water buffalo. But they don't. Unfortunately, they miss their opportunity. So you've got those kinds of things. You've got things like this that just sort of is really out there, but an interesting way, certainly, to communicate. This is Art Buchwald. And when he died, before he died, he recorded his visual obituary for the New York Times. And so when you play this, he'll say, "Hi, I'm Art Buchwald, and I just died." And so when you listen to this, you're listening to a man that has passed away, but his last message, his last word, is literally this video, and it's really compelling, and it's very, very sad, but yet it's very uplifting at the same time. So, given that capability and the fact that we've got all these new devices and we have new capacities for capturing media, really the most powerful producer of visual imagery is you. It's the individual. So there's lots of examples of that. We've got in 2005, this is the first image from the London subway bombings. This is Adam Stacey, and that was the very, very famous image that traveled around the world. We've also got this image which is captured and transmitted. This is the I-35 bridge collapse up in Minneapolis a couple years ago. And of course, we have the most famous, or one of the most famous photos ever transmitted by TwitPics, and that's the U.S. Airways, the plane in the Hudson River after that particular crash. Well, it's fine to take all these images and capture all these images, but to be really, truly effective visual literate person today, you have to be able to share it. And so this is really the fourth part of the framework, is that you have to be able to share it. And I wouldn't have been able to see those three images had people not chosen to share those. And we have to help kids understand how to share media that they take, because they can be contributors too. There's no reason why they can't be. So John Seeley Brown says, "You're defined by what you create, share, and allow others to mash up." And that's one of the most intriguing areas of visual literacy. For example, when we help kids with digital storytelling, or in our school we have a digital storytelling program, we teach kids on how to craft a visual message. And that's incredibly important. We post a lot of those to YouTube, and if you don't have the ability right now in 2011 to craft a visual message and distribute it through different video venues, you're really on the outside looking in. And I believe that sincerely, that's a skill that we have to teach our kids. And there's a tremendous number of sub-skills within that, and ability to find and locate. Again, going back to those original three ideas, being able to shoot video and take it your own video, but also be able to take still frames that you take, or that you get from Flickr, for example, and mash those up and create your brand new message from not only your original content that you create, but the content of others. That's a 21st century skill for sure. So, when we're talking about sharing, I love this site. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you have a smartphone, download this and play around with this. This is called PixelPipe. In PixelPipe, you see all the different social media sites. So what happens with my camera, what I can do is I can literally take a photo, for example, and I can select which pipe I want to distribute that photo to. For example, you see Dropbox, you see Flickr, you see LinkedIn, all the different things you see in front of you, and I've only taken probably a screenshot of probably about a third of them. So what happens is, as soon as I take that photo, I get to share it, and I share it with PixelPipe, but I distribute it to all the different sites that I've selected, all the different pipes that I've selected. So my phone now becomes not just a phone to talk and talk to somebody. It's not just a camera, but it's now a media distribution platform. And so I want to project my presence. I want to project my media, and I can do that with a simple free app that I can download and send imagery really, literally around the world through a variety of social media pipes. Completely intriguing where this can go. We've also got, you don't have to look very far to see this kind of stuff. This is a pretty famous graphic now that made its way around the web really quickly. And look what happens in the 60 seconds I talk about this slide. 6,600 new photos are going to be uploaded to Flickr in a single minute, if you can believe that. Look at the Facebook status at about 5 o'clock or about 4:30. 695,000, if I can read that correctly, put my glasses on here. 695,000 Facebook updates, 79,000 wall posts, 510,000 comments in 60 seconds, half of those from Glenbrook South, where I work. We've got 600 plus new videos. So the reach of social media and the ability to use social media to craft a message and distribute your own personal media, but also get other media, is just unmitigated. It'll never stop. It's just going to keep going and going and going. So that's important. When you take a look at YouTube, for example, this is just crazy stuff. 48 hours of video are uploaded every minute. 48 hours of video every minute. 3 billion videos are viewed a day. Users upload the equivalent of 240,000 full-length films every week. That's just absolutely crazy. So again, I'm going back to my comments about crafting a message in video. It's extremely important. I can also use SlideShare, and this is one of my favorite sites. You can find my content and all my presentations on SlideShare. You have to help kids craft presentations. That's part of life. We all have to do it, and not only do we have to do it and do it well, but we also have to share those, in my opinion. So if you don't have a SlideShare account, you should go and explore that, because it's a great way to distribute your slide decks, get feedback on that, and have conversations about your content in the common areas. Okay, that's important. This is also, and more schools are going to this. This is, in terms of sharing, this is Google Docs, and what I'm doing is creating a presentation in the presentation component of Google Docs. And this is a presentation I did for the Google Teacher Academy, but I have the capability to share this with anybody I want. And what our kids do now at Glenbrook South is that we have Google Apps for Education. Every student has a Google Apps account, and they build presentations together online at night. So I can share this with 4 people, and we can build content together at the same time. When you're talking about that and using visuals to craft messages, it's now just not a single person doing the work. It's multiple people doing the work at the same time. Very, very interesting, and that has a lot of implications for how we approach pedagogy and how we structure classes to allow for that. That's something that's a challenge in schools in a lot of ways, breaking through some of the old paradigms about how instruction occurs and how content is created. Now we have the capability to create content together, and what does that mean, and how do we structure that so it's effectively used? The other thing that I have is I have this account. I have a Posteris account, and again, this is a simple blogging platform. And again, you look at the blue arrow, and right down that vertical column, I can share my content anywhere I want through multiple different kinds of social media. So I can project my presence with writing, with visual imagery, with some very simple tools very quickly. Okay, in regards to that, I can also, here's the 5th component of this, I think it's number 5. We have to be and help kids understand how to be capable of working in multiple mediums to create messages. And I do want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to give you an example from my biology background, what I would do. But I'm going to give you an example first, and then I'm going to start talking about some visual literacy principles that are something you can use tomorrow, and something that can improve what you do in terms of how you communicate with visuals. When I was a classroom teacher, you might remember a process called cell division, and I used to lecture for 2 class periods on cell division. And the kids would dutifully take notes. They'd record them in paper. They'd study cell division, and then they'd memorize that, and they'd do pretty well on the test, but in 2 weeks they'd forget cell division. And there are other ways in which to teach this. If I were doing it right now, if I was back in the classroom, what I would do would be this. Cell division, for the most part, when you talk about, first of all, to give them an authentic context for understanding cell division and why it's important, not only what we're going to do, but why we're doing it. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about cancer. And really, cancer, for the most part, is, when cells divide, one goes to two, and so on. And they generally stop dividing. But sometimes they keep going, and they form a big mass, and sometimes that can become a tumor. So to understand cancer, you have to understand the essence of that, and that is cell division. So right now I've given them really an important context for understanding why cells divide and what can happen when things go wrong. I've also given them the essential question: how does a cell go from 1 to 2? And I'm going to say, what's your plan? Okay, what's the plan the cell has? Instead of me lecturing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them images from Google. Okay, I'll give them images from Flickr. I'm going to give them YouTube videos on the process. I'm going to give them animations. I'm going to give them simulations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all the volume down, or ask them to turn all the volume down on all those tools. And I'm going to ask them, and be very careful about how I select the visual elements so that they have no text with them. So what I'm going to do is go in here in the first case, and I'm going to give them all the resources, because what I want them to do is interpret the visual elements. Okay, so I'm going to ask them to develop a plan on how a cell goes from 1 cell to 2 by looking at different kinds of visual content that are online. But I'm going to craft the lesson in such a way that they have to use their power, take advantage of that bandwidth again to process the content that's inherent within the images, the animations, simulations, or the video. I don't want anybody explaining them to them. I want them to craft and create their own meaning by doing that interpretation. So I kill two birds with one stone. I work on my content skills, but I also have an opportunity to develop an additional very important skill. And what I would do after 2 class periods is bring them back together, and we'd talk about the plans and course correct. We'd come up with a commonly held understanding of that particular plan. I think that's a much more powerful kind of lesson, something that would engage our kids much more than a simple lecture. Now, I'd also teach them how to build their content into a wiki. This is along the same lines of the Kennedy assassination, something I'm interested in, being able to merge and add different visual elements along with text that allow kids to craft or tell a story about a particular, in this case, a very important part of American history. So I teach them how to not only develop messages, or not only how to interpret visual elements, but also expect them then to craft a message and use their own elements, visual elements, to build in the contemporary platform for understanding. I'd use a wiki in this case, and Wikispaces is real good. And then I'd also, where the situation arose where the understanding or the content that's being created has a geographical context, I teach them how to build in another platform, Google Earth, and I teach them how to craft messages in Google Earth. For example, if I was asking kids to study the invasive movements of Asian carp in the Illinois River into Lake Michigan, that has a geographical context as we follow migration up the Mississippi to Illinois and so on. I'd ask them to build content and create a Google Earth project that would add that geographical context to the project. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about visual literacy principles, and this is a big one to remember when you're building a slide deck or any presentation. Use images to communicate, not to decorate. The first thing I see when I see a slide deck, and if I see clip art, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. That's just decoration. It doesn't really communicate anything. So you got to be, as you gain more experience with messages and visual elements, you're going to be talking, they're going to be listening, but you also can take advantage of that bandwidth to create a really powerful setting for what you're about to say or are saying. So this is the key thing here. Look at this. This is people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. And you should be able to tell me why right now. There's obviously that biological background. I would point you to this resource, Richard Mayer, Multimedia Learning, which every teacher should have on his or her shelf. You can find a lot of it online, but if you want, in my opinion, one of the definitive resources for understanding how to communicate visually and how to do it properly, that's research-based, look no further than Multimedia Learning by Mayer. Okay, so the other one I point you to is Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina, and here's some of the things that he says. If you hear something, 3 days later you'll remember 10%. So if you hear something, you will remember 10% of that 3 days later. If you see something and hear something, let me see. Now you see something. I'm sorry. You'll remember that 35%, 35% of that 3 days later. But if you see it and hear it, you'll remember 65% of that content 3 days later. So the power of the visual element, along with being able to listen to someone explain the content, of course, is extremely important. And that makes sense, I think. Continuing on with some really important things, let's go back to some biology. Of the 16 million colors the human eye can see, guess which one you see first? Yeah, you see yellow first. Now, they used to think it was red, but biologists have found that of all the colors that the human eye can perceive, all the different shades and so on, you see yellow first. And where that comes into play is right here. Okay, and they're starting to paint fire trucks yellow. And the reason why is because we see yellow first, and that makes sense with an emergency vehicle. Now, let's talk about other colors. Besides that, now we've got yellow, we've got green, which means renewal for Americans. When you see red, it means danger or alert. When you see light blue, like in this photograph, it means this is Americans' favorite color is blue. So when you take a, this is actually on North Aurora Road in Naperville, the Blockbuster and a Goodyear. Blue, why? Because we like it. We're Americans. Yellow, so we can see it. Those designs are intentional. The use of those colors are intentional. Okay. I should also mention that when you're talking about dark blue signifies trust. So when you're building slide decks, for example, you got to be careful on the kinds of colors that you use, and understand that different colors mean different things in different cultures. So if you're presenting in a different country, you have to be concerned about that and make sure you understand the implications of color relative to their culture. But when you're talking about dark blue, and at least in America, you're talking about trust. And all you have to do is go no further than a bank or your bank statements to see that. I would challenge you to take a look at your bank statements. I'll bet every one of them has dark blue involved in it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about font. This is a serif font, and it's got these little hooks that allow the eye to travel left to right. This is a sans serif font, and you have to understand not only images, not only color, and so on, but you have to understand the use of text to communicate. Up on top, you see that particular text, and this is one of the easiest things to correct, and I see it all the time. The default in PowerPoint is a serif font, Times New Roman, and that's great when you want to read a paper like a test or some kind of worksheet or something like that. But when you're projecting text, use a sans serif font like a Tahoma or an Arial or a Helvetica. You see those, you see that sans serif down below, and it's much more legible when it's projected. So the difference in the font, and again, the font can communicate meaning. So never, 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 when you're presenting, use Comic Sans. And it's not illegal in 34 states, but you'd be surprised at the number of audiences that actually believe that. Kids will believe it. It's really easy to convince kids of that. Comic Sans, if you're using that's just not going to cut it. Okay. Here's a sign, got pain. I want my back doctor. I want my back doctor to use a proper font. I'm not too excited about a back doctor that uses Comic Sans. Or, I don't think this, there it is. Yep. A little bit of humor for you. Please keep the door closed. Please don't use Comic Sans. We're a Fortune 500 company, not a lemonade stand. So that's just it. You got to make sure you choose the proper font when you do presentations and communicate visually. It's really important. Okay. I've got 5 minutes, Jeff. I'm gonna make this. So the next principle here, and when you read these online in my document at jakes.editme.com, it makes a lot more sense when you can read through all the principles and they're all linked together on paper. It seems to be somewhat easier to process. However, when you combine visuals with other multimedia, this is a big thing for me. A competitive voice, one that can be heard. Okay. And the fact that with all the media that's out there and everybody's ability to produce media, messages that are crafted in a meaningful way and give users or give the producers, hopefully a competitive voice, one that can be heard, that can rise above all the different kinds of media that are being produced. And I'm not talking about Dylan's Couch either, something like this. This is Dylan. He's got his own TV show on YouTube. He's got multiple episodes, and here he's talking about his history project when he's in 8th grade. And you know what? They have these skills. They can put up some bad videos, but take a look in the lower right. It's got 1.38 something million views. That's crazy. Now, granted, probably a million of the views are Dylan himself, but look at the audience that kids can have when they craft a message. And this particular message is, it's fun, it's lighthearted, and so on. But I'm more interested in helping kids craft messages of true importance. We helped some kids build YouTube videos through our digital storytelling program when I was in Donner's Grove about what it means to be an American. We called it the Digital Diplomacy Project. You've got 2 minutes to explain to your peers around the world what it means to be an American. And this particular girl took a stab at immigration. And what immigration, she was Hispanic, so she wanted to talk about immigration and when she immigrated in the United States and what that meant to her and her family. So we have opportunities to craft messages of deep importance with kids. This is a friend of mine. This is Sarah, and this is a friend of my one of my friend's daughters. And a couple of years ago, when President Obama gave his first speech, there was a lot of concern about that. And what Sarah did was actually recorded her own comments in a video she did with a simple webcam, and she posted that to YouTube, and it went viral in 2 days. And you see the number of views and ratings and comments that she got. This is a 10-year-old kid with a webcam. Look at the kind of reach she has for her ideas. And in Wes, her father, Wes Fryer, her father, he had to spend a great deal of time going through the comments because there was tremendous amounts of hate directed at this little 10-year-old. And one of the things we have to help kids understand is that when you post messages, you have to understand how to manage the comments and respond respectfully to comments. It doesn't take long for a YouTube video and the comments to go south pretty quickly. So we have to help kids not only when they're craft messages, but when they respond to message, we have to help them with developing their comments. Okay. Again, plenty of venues for important messages. This is Stories for Change. This is something that's outside of YouTube, and this is run by the Center for Digital Storytelling in Berkeley. And this is an opportunity for people to craft videos and place them in a place dedicated to support videos that stimulate change in this country and really around the world. So, if you're into helping kids create videos, YouTube is one thing, and that's the easy default. But to find other locations that might be more serious is a challenge for education. But they're out there, and it's important to keep looking and explore those when we do find them. The next step in the framework is this. When you're able to craft a message, the important part is networks. And networks for sharing collaboration extend that voice. Okay, and if you take a look at the statement here, the network is more powerful than the node. And when some of my blog posts, for example, when they get out there into some of the networks and get spread through networks, have 5,000 to 6,000 views. And it's amazing. Something that I write in an hour or an hour and a half is seen by 6,000 people. And to be able to post content either in Flickr or YouTube and have that same kind of expectation for people viewing it is realistic. And it's important. And when you were talking about the capability, doesn't that suggest to us that there's new skill sets that kids have to understand and be able to master and demonstrate to be really effective citizens, really, in 2011 and beyond? I think that's something that we fail to think about is that how are we helping these kids being able to use these networks for distributing their own ideas, and understanding visual literacy is certainly a part of that. Moving beyond that, then, once you're part of the network, and you become a member of the conversation, and that can be a community. The community can exist in Facebook, it can exist in Twitter, but there's multiple ways in which to extend and move beyond just the 800 square cinder block room of 800 square foot cinder block classroom of your school. Lots of ways to create networks today and really extend your ideas, but also be impacted by the ideas of others. I see that people that are involved in social networks, especially those that contain a lot of education members, have a more pliable mind. And what I mean by that is that they become exposed to more ideas and have an opportunity to grow and develop as educators much more than people who are not connected to other educators around the world. So that's important for us, but it's also important to help our kids understand that networks can be a big part of learning for them now and really in the future. And what I mean by that, I was just working on a video for the K-12 online conference, which is running right now, and I was using Camtasia Studio, and I could not figure out a component on something in Camtasia wasn't working. So I turned to YouTube to learn, and this is the video I saw, and I get sort of humbled a little bit by the fact that this 10-year-old that you see in the screen explained to me how to fix what I was trying to fix. So anybody can be a teacher nowadays, and when you tap into these networks, you have an opportunity to really have different venues for learning, and really everybody can be a potential teacher, and you can be a learner in a lot of different contexts. So with that being said, everybody can learn from each other, and this is the final component of this. Everybody can learn from each other independent of time, space, place, and now device. So that's something to keep in mind. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I went over 2 minutes, Jeff. I apologize for that, but thank you very much. And be sure to go to jakes.editme.com. Look for the visual literacy framework, and all the resources that I talked about, plus many more, are linked there for you. You can read it and explore it, certainly, and continue to develop your ideas centered around visual literacy.
Well, thanks there, Dave. We appreciate that. I want to go back a little bit further. In particular, the students are a variety of different grade levels. Some of them are working with young kids. So if I really want to get to the base level, if I have some kids who are really beginners, what do you think? Recommend for me 1 or 2 or 3 steps that are really fundamental, that with visual literacy and with technology in general, that will really help me start a foundation with kids, so that when I pass them off to the next level, they're ready to move on to the next step. So Dave, where are you here with? Just give us some fundamental steps to get people started.
It's a pretty challenging question, but an outstanding one. Where do you get started with young kids? Well, the first thing that I would do, and to get started, and this is probably not what you're looking for, but the first thing I'm going to do in a school is I'm going to figure out what I want learning to look like, and I think that is something that has to occur at an organizational level. So here's what happens in a lot of cases is that one teacher may be very adept at technology or using visual elements in their instruction and helping kids use those to craft their own meaning, and then they go to the next grade level or the next class, and that's not taking place. So I think the first thing that I would look for in a high quality educational institution would be the willingness to develop a sequence that makes sense in terms of how we identify what kids need to know about visual literacy. I think that's the key thing. The second thing, that's one step. It's something that obviously would take a great deal of time to do within an organization. In our current climate, even a bigger challenge. That's the first thing. The second thing is if I was just starting out with visual literacy, what I would do is I would get the book by Linnell Burmack. That's the first thing to do or second thing that I would think of do, something you can do tomorrow to deepen your understanding, and that's again something that should be on your shelf. I'm trying to remember the site that I want to give you guys right now. I'm going to put it right in the chat. One of the things that you can do also, when you're talking about visuals and using visuals with young kids, what's happening is, obviously you're not going to put them in front of a search engine because they'll see all kinds of things. So one of the things to get kids to work, even with young kids certainly, to get kids to work with visuals, you have to supply them. Okay, and one of the tools that you can use is a tool that's out there called Flickerstorm. Please put that into a search engine to find it. And what that will do is allow you to search for images and create a sort of like a playlist of images that actually creates a web page, and you just give the kids the link. And what that does is when you give the kids the link, it will return what you searched. So in other words, what you're doing is you're creating a set of images for the kids to use that you've already searched and they are safe. So you have to find a way to make sure that the images that they're working with are safe, and not only safe but effective in terms of the context of the assignment. One of the things that we even did at the high school level was give kids a question and then give them 40 different images, and then you have to create a story using those using 10 of those 40 images. So in this particular case, it was about addiction, and certainly not a young student topic. But what the kids had to do is craft a story around addiction. Use 10 of those. It was a health class. Use 10 of those images out of the 40 to tell the story. And in all cases, in 90 kids, I think it was, there wasn't a single repeat of a sequence of a 10-story image sequence with selecting 10 from a pool of 40. Another thing you can do is give kids in a single image and have them write. Have them talk about what the meaning. That's another easy step. So I don't think I'm answering your question really too well, Jeff. It's actually a really great blog post. If I write that, I'll send you the link. You can share that. Let me think more deeply about it, because it's an intriguing question. I don't have a really good answer for you at the moment, but it's all about putting the visuals in the hands of kids, and then as a high quality teacher, how do you not only help them understand the content behind that, but what the visual means. You still there?
Yeah. How do they follow you, David? To or where should they follow you to find out the things that you're working on? For a beginner in the field, how do they get started here? And I think one of the people they want to follow is you, whether it's in Twitter or wherever else you are. Where's the best place? So you're posting a couple of those things there. So that's which one would you suggest to be the number one?
My probably I would go to the djakes.posteris.com. That's where I'm most active in terms of blogging. And I've got a series of essays I'm writing about words matter, and looking at single words in education and ideas, and how we interpret how those single words and the ideas behind them interpret what people do in education. That's one place. The site I'm going to type in here now, this is probably where you see my most current work. It's my presentation work, and there's probably about 35 presentations there right now. One of the things that I'm doing right now is exploring the idea of what if, and in the way in which school cultures respond to new ideas. And right now, in a lot of ways, and I watch it happen in our building all the time, when new ideas are brought to bear, the first response is a yeah but, and people find out trying to shut down ideas and look at why something won't work rather than why things might work. So that's my current interest. I'm also interested in learning spaces right now. I've done a lot of work on that. You can find that at jakes.editme.com. The other thing to look at is do a search for this, the K-12 online conference, which I have. I'm going to be the featured presenter on Friday. I'll be doing it's about a 30-minute video that'll be posted, and I talk about that what if, and changing. Is entitled what if the story changed, and so I'm it's a provocative approach to school change, and how to think about a multiple. Actually, I do 5 different vignettes about change in schools and the way in which we can look at change. So those are the places I'm at. It's not too hard to find me online. I'm in multiple different places, and a lot of those things are listed at jakes.editme.com. You can see how to find all my information there.
Okay, we'll cut you loose here momentarily. Let's see if there's a question or two from other participants. Anyone here have a question? Otherwise, we'll stop the recording and set David free for this evening with our great thanks.
Please feel free to go ahead and ask a question. Sorry, that was a half hour. I hope that wasn't too fast, but hopefully you pulled out some things you can take a look at, and hopefully gave you a perspective that on visual literacy that you didn't have before the presentation. That there's a lot of things that are taking place right now that where our kids really need to be. We really need to help our kids become more visually literate, because it's such an important skill with all the capabilities of all the social media and all the tools that we have at our disposal to produce and consume imagery and visual messages is something that we really need to start tackling.
Looks like there's a question there, David.
You know that's an interesting that's that's an interesting question. If you come across any trouble with students traveling through different websites, you know, um, I'm actually in our library. I'm in charge of our library, and we have three computer labs in there. Now I'm talking about high school kids, and in the 3.5 years I've been at Glenbrook South, I've never had really an instance where I'd had to reprimand or deal with a student that was using websites inappropriately. I'm not saying that does not occur. Are there? So I think that was really a big deal for high schools a while ago, and the concern. I think the concern is sort of abated a little bit. I think it's certainly a very important concern still for K-8 education, but in the high schools, we've got to at some point we got to trust them and open it up and say this is our expectation, and you better do it right. If we catch them doing something, we deal with it. Um, any laws related to this, or more of a district choice? There's the SIPA, which is the Child Internet Protection Act. There's NSIPA, which is the Neighborhood Child Internet Protection Act. Yeah, there are laws, and the laws are related in some cases to funding, E-rate dollars. Um, but if I remember correctly, you have to have a filter. You have to own a filter. It doesn't necessarily have to even be in place. Uh, but there's three things that you have to filter, and all schools do this. And I can't remember the three. It's pornography. It's Jeff. If you know him, help me out here. There's three. Things that I'd have to look back into the literature to see the three things, but there are specific instances, and really when you're talking about filtering, it's a community, it's a reflection of your community. I think in a lot of ways, there are areas in the Chicagoland area, for example, that have more religious kind of community where you see a higher degree of filtering. We're pretty open. Our climate and our parents want an open experience for their kids, so. The schools in our perspectives and our direction on that reflect the values of the community and the wants and needs of the parents, education they want to have for their kids.
Okay, well, David, we thank you for your time this evening, and you're welcome to hang in. I'm going to see if we want to have any further discussion here among us, but we appreciate you being here, and thanks for your time this evening.